Blog Talk Radio.
This is the USA Emergency Broadcast Network, your source for reliable disaster preparedness information.
Has Nibiru returned? If so, how safe is your location? In partnership with ZetaTalk.com and thepoleshiftning.com, USAEBN will present what this means for your location. Tune in the first Monday of each month for the Situational Preparedness broadcast. Sinkholes, mountain building, and tidal waves and deluge. What does this mean for you?
Today, you ate Greek yogurt. You took the train. You wondered why people spend so much time reading celebrity blogs. You read a celebrity blog. You planned a workout. You skipped it. You did all the things that one normally does the day before a devastating earthquake shakes the community to the ground. You never know when the day before is the day before. Prepare for tomorrow at ready.gov/today. Brought to you by FEMA and the Ad Council.
You take the blue pill. The story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to. You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Welcome to the Zeta Report here on Situational Preparedness, USA Emergency Broadcasting Network. We are live Mondays. First Monday of the month, we have a special guest on the program. We welcome back again to Situational Preparedness and USAEBN, partner with us on monthly on the first Mondays. Nancy Leader from ZetaTalk.com and poleshift.ning.com. Nancy, welcome back.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here. And today we're going to talk about climate change impact, some unusual impacts that people may not associate with climate change. We hear about storms and, drought and deluge, but there's so much more. But before we get into that, I want to remind the listening audience that although USAEBN has partnered with Zeta Talk on the Zeta Report, whenever we inject Zeta Talk prophecy, because Zeta Talk is noted for its prophecy, we will always mention that it is prophecy is not fact. It is an opinion, and it only becomes fact when it happens. Now, the Zetas are remarkably accurate, but have been wrong on occasion, and you should bear that in mind. For more information on this subject, you can visit ZetaTalk.com on the web or the Zeta Report on YouTube. Now, folks, we're going to try to replicate what we did last month, which was let me give my talk, and then at the end of the hour, when there's time, take questions from the chat, or call in questions and the like. But Andrea is going to try to bite his lip and not interrupt until I'm done rattling off what I've prepared. So,
actually,
change.
What I'll do is what I'll do on this end, Nancy, just to kind of streamline everything too, is I'll monitor the chat room. If any questions come up, I'll save them till the end of the show so we can get through it.
Sounds great. Okay, well, let's get to the end of the show then, because I know there's just likely to be questions. Okay, in the opinion of the Zetas, global warming, which does exist, is not man-made, but caused by the approach of Nibiru, which is a.k.a. Planet X, Wormwood, the Great Destroyer, the Red Planet, whatever. The term has been changed lately to be called climate change, which of course it is. But I'm calling this climate change rather than global warming, and to differentiate, not man-made, but caused by Nibiru. We recently had big storm hit the side of Mexico, and it was considered the largest storm, cyclone or hurricane. The force of the winds was clocked at 215 miles an hour, and I think the strongest prior to that was 195. So getting more vicious, right? Well, we know that the globe is dealing with more weather changes, increased storms, drought and deluge, etc. This is not caused by hotter air. This is caused by the Earth wobble, which, in the opinion of the Zetas, and this Earth wobble began in 2004 after Nibiru arrived in the inner solar system in 2003. Now, regarding the wobble, people actually measure this. I was talking to an individual yesterday who said that he was watching a periscope of, which is sort of like a cell phone video that's live. And this person was in Dubai and taking the sun rising in the east and had to move 20 degrees further, than expected in order to capture the sunrise, and was saying, "What's the sun doing over there?" This kind of thing happens all the time. And people, because they do not see this discussed in the media, they think, well, it can't be true. Another instance was someone in Denmark who sent me a capture from a webcam where it was civil twilight at 1 o'clock in the morning. Well, their sun does not rise until 4. Civil twilight is an hour before sunrise. So this was way early, and I confirmed this with people who live in that area. So this is caused by the wobble, and you can determine that. So it's not just in the opinion of the Zetas, but many people who are observing where the sun rises, where the sun sets, etc. The moon is not in the right place, and this type of thing can, if you're curious, you can get accurate and do this checking yourself. Okay, the permafrost. Here's another piece of evidence that is climate change. We hear about the Arctic melting, which might be warm air, or some changes going on in Antarctica where this side is melting, but whoops, now that side is refreezing, and et cetera, et cetera. But in the opinion of the Zetas, the temperature of the globe has increased in places, but not due to an increase in air temperature, but due to an increase in heat coming up from below, from the core of the Earth outward. Thus, the permafrost is melting from the bottom up, for instance, which it is. The core of the Earth, the magma, roils due to the near presence of Nibiru, thus the increase in volcanic activity. This increase in undersea volcanoes in Indonesia is the source of the El Nino events. Now, as far as the permafrost melting from the bottom up, this is basically of record where people, the houses that are built on the permafrost are tipping and they've lost their footing. And why would that be? Air temperature cannot go down, the heat rises, and therefore, and scientists have even noted that rocks are heating from below up toward the surface. But this is not stressed in the media because until Nibiru is admitted to be real, you're not going to get the truth about all this. Climate change, what's causing it. And in fact, even when it is admitted, you may not get the truth because of all the lawsuits that would be engendered, of people forced to reduce their carbon footprint. And I'm talking about corporations, which would have a stroke about this. They would say, I'm having to pay taxes, I'm having to adjust, my emissions and all that, and now you tell me it's all because of this planet, and so there will never be an admission that global warming was not the cause of this because they don't want the courts clogged. All right, what's next? What kind of climate change is an evidence? It's just not what the weatherman says. It's also things that affect all life on Earth in ways that the news does not touch on. We're talking, you hear about the storms. You heard about the big one hitting the coast of Mexico recently and the like. You hear about the Arctic melting, but you do not hear about germs migrating, immune systems dropping, the magnetic wallop because this passing planet, Nibiru, is pointing its magnetic north pole toward us, and it has a charged tail that normally drags along behind it, but blows around. It's vast. It's sweeping Earth. It's dropping red dust, and And yes, it is interfering with our magnetic field, charging electromagnetic pulse, messing around with our electrical systems and bringing down our airplanes now and then. And it also makes people feel dizzy, woozy, and because the wobble is creating plate movements, trapped vegetation between rock layers, and methane is created underground without oxygen. It does not need oxygen the rotting vegetation will produce methane pools. And when that's released, sometimes you have birds dropping out of the sky, fish dying, and people don't feel so good either if they get in the way of that. Methane poisoning, explosive, yes. So let's start with evidence of climate change caused by the Earth wobble. For the Zetas, the Earth wobble includes a polar push once a day when the magnetic North Pole comes up over the horizon to face the Sun and the magnetic North Pole of the magnetic bully Nibiru pushes away. Now, this is ostensibly in the opinion of the Zetas, but if you track the Earth wobble, you will find that this is happening, which I did from 2004 on. And this is all on my website, where I found that if you were above the North Pole looking down, that it was forming a type of figure 8. I did this by consulting with over a dozen people around the globe that I trusted to take an accurate azimuth altitude measure. When is the sun rising? Where is it overhead, etc.? And I found that figure 8 was consistent year after year. The jet stream is not in the right place anymore. It has really contorted, and at first this got into the news, but now the weatherman just acts like all this is normal. Over the United States, it's normally kind of like a V. It comes in on the west coast, it dips, toward the south, and then it goes back up, so that where it came in and where it leaves is on the same latitude, but it has a V. Well, now it's gotten really extreme. It's almost vertical in the center, and all kinds of contortions are going on. There's no other explanation for this other than the wobble. The wobble pushes the Americas back and forth, so the waters of both the Pacific and the Atlantic wash back and forth. And this is following, in other words, the jet stream represents the atmosphere, but we don't really have a picture of what's going on in the currents in the ocean. But the wildlife, the critters that live in the ocean, they notice. An example, sea lions. Up and down the West Coast, particularly California, they live there and are getting sick. Great numbers of starving sea lions and seals, are found on the beaches. In 2009, there was an algae clump that was found floating in the Arctic and had been pushed there up through the Bering Straits, and this hit the news, and maybe not the mainstream news, your nightly news, but it was in the news, and it's, look, what is this algae doing floating in the Arctic? Well, it didn't grow there. It got washed there by the wobble sloshing in the Pacific as the globe is pushed away, where the magnetic North Pole is, sort of more over toward the Siberia now than it is over toward Canada, and then bouncing back and forth, figure 8 every day, and that sloshing brought that algae up from the Pacific. Okay, starfish is another critter that lives on both coasts, Atlantic and Pacific, and at the same general time frame, it got in the news, like Nature publications and the like. Oh dear, the starfish seemed to be dissolving. They were coming apart in pieces, and they were dying. And what's all this about? Well, starfish don't grow everywhere, but they are known to be in certain places along the Atlantic and the Pacific. And it was a big puzzlement, and people were saying, this is pollution. We don't know what's causing this. Well, Of course, the Zetas were asked, and they, as usual, had an explanation that made sense. They said the exoskeletons of starfish are made of calcium. And just as we have sinkholes in the United States where calcium, which is limestone, can have karst formation, it gets washed away by rainwater, and then you have these huge sinkholes. China has a terrible problem with this. They have a band of limestone caverns, and then when they collapse, the surface collapse, you say, good heavens, does it go down to hell? It's just huge, deep sinkholes. Well, the poor starfish have the same situation. If they're calcium exoskeletons, which are washed by the ocean, dissolve, they fall apart. They don't have interior bones. So this is because of the washing back and forth in both the Atlantic and the Pacific caused by the wobble. Not something you hear on the nightly news, but it is a climate change issue. Beetles. Someone asked the Zetas to talk about why so many pines in the west of the United States were afflicted with bark beetles. Why has this suddenly happened? And it's a matter of, as the climate change, you have not only germs migrating, but insects migrating also. Critters try to find their niche, and if their niche has moved or they're opportunistic, if something is opened up, a seed, springs up and does well, now you have weeds migrating, etc. Well, in this case, bark beetles became opportunistic as the climate was changing in some way, and as they moved into the pines, they brought a fungus with them because they had this symbiotic relationship with the fungi. So you see it's not all good, but at the same time, it can prove, to be beneficial for some species. Crops. We are having terrific crop shortages. Drought and deluge cycles were something that the Zetas predicted back in 1995, knowing that the wobble would be instituted and it would create, droughts and deluges, intractable droughts, switching about to become deluge, and boy, are we having that. In any case, this has shown up with increasing crop shortages worldwide. Food prices have gone up in step. The main food-producing countries in 2008 were the U.S., Brazil, China, and India, followed by Argentina and Australia, and I'm going off of a UN map, that showed these as the big food producers, exporters, and they're all slammed by drought, or almost all of them, so that it is creating a rise in prices. You go in, the shelves may not have the variety of foods you're looking for. There may be a delay before something gets stocked, This is another example of climate change, the impact of climate change, which is really not in the news all that much, although the UN was squawking about it a few years ago. They stopped emphasizing that. The idea is not to have everyone panic. And I was just thinking the other day when I was noticing we have all these commercials saying, send money, for the poor pets, who we need your $19 a month, for the kitties and puppies and all that kind of thing. And I'm all for that, but didn't we used to see about the starving kids in Africa and the starving kids?
Yeah.
What happened to those? They seem to be gone, those commercials. It's like we're de-emphasizing the fact that a great number of people in the world are starving, and the starvation has not gone away. Deluge. In 2014, we have record-breaking rains producing floods happening all over the world. This was also, as I mentioned, something that the Zetas predicted in 1995. They said that the drought and deluge would switch about. I can remember thinking of Florida as a place that is a swampy, and with adequate rain. And when I found that the Everglades were burning at one point, I thought, what? We have fires in the Everglades, where you're having drought in places where you would never expect, and places where Texas, southern Texas, is just in huge amounts of rain, and it's record breaking. And I used to, back in 1995 when Zeta Talk first started, actually try to keep a page of the records that were broken this year in weather. And within 3 or 4 years, it was too big. I had to stop. The point had been made. And now it seems that almost every day there's records being broken.
Well, it's
Tornadoes,
like almost every day. It's like every day is a 100-year storm. I mean, how many weekly 100-year storms are we going to have?
Right.
And that's what they're doing. They're
Good
playing
point.
a name game on it. It's like we're not going to talk about the vortex, and now it's like, okay, well, that's just a big whatever. I'll let you go. I'm sorry.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like I think they either sent these poor weathermen to schools and said, just don't look aghast. Don't just throw your hands up and say you don't know what to say. Just keep a straight face when you report all this. And whatever you do, don't give any indication to the public that this is really getting severe, because they don't want panic in the people, and they're being forced. Really, the powers that be, or however you want to put it, are being forced to say to the public, we have to give you an explanation, especially because that big thing in the skies is now being seen so readily and so often. And I can go through that, toward the end. It's not really a climate change issue, but there is some news along those lines. Tornadoes are now increased to be larger, more frequent, and appearing in unusual places. This is also something that the Zetas had predicted way back. Reacting to the turmoil in the atmosphere caused by the wobble. And tornado increases, that's measurable. You can see it in the charts. And yes, you could say that that's warmer air in turmoil, but things like the increase in volcanoes or the increase in earthquakes, that does not compute. That's not from warmer air. Albinos. The Zetas predicted in 1995 that there would be an increase in albinos, as in the white buffalo of legend, due to why was that like an end time legend, of the American Indian, the white buffalo, because of the emanations from the core, the roiling core that's causing the permafrost to melt, etc., etc. Now, why do creatures in caves? They don't have any, they're not tan, they're white, they're pale, they're translucent skin. And this is because, according to the Zetas, they don't need the melanin to protect their body and their skin from the rays of the sun. So they're pale. So when you have a roiling core, critters of the earth, which share DNA, we all share DNA, we're all from the same little primordial ooze, in the start of evolution, etc. They're getting the same hint from the emanations from the earth that you're in a cave. You don't need to have melanin, and so we have albinos increase. Frogs. For a while, there was deformed and dying frogs that were hitting the news. What's causing all the frogs to die? And then pretty soon it was all over the world they were dying, in very puzzling numbers. And this was the expansion to run around the world was something, again, that the Zetas predicted. And it played out that way. It happened. This is another Zeta prediction, and the deformed and dying frogs are due to the effects of not only the core emanations, but the tail of Planet X, the electromagnetic that affects DNA, and the DNA and the frogs, the eggs are laid in the water. It's very exposed to the sunlight and also anything that this passing planet may cast down, and therefore, and we've had odd birth defects, an increase. I'm thinking in particular of poor India, where they have these children on occasion that are born with 3 or 4 legs and 2 or 3 arms, and that type of deformity, birth defects are on the increase around the world. Certainly came out in the deformed frogs that appeared about 5-7 years ago or so. Morgellans disease, remember when that was hitting the press, and it was this affliction, and people would say there's like little stringy things coming out of my skin,
right.
and nobody knew what was causing that, and maybe it was that you have a cotton product that you're wearing, a little nematode might live in the cotton. Well, the Zeta said that it's actually a symbiotic relationship between the nematode and some bacteria and spread by ticks, blah, 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 and a depressed immune system, so that it was this combination of factors. Well, the news was saying that Europe had this problem 300 years ago, so it's not completely unknown, but it was an affliction that people were talking about. Where did this come from? I know it was in the U.S. a lot. Very sad. People were trying to bathe in bleach and anything they could think of. So
yeah.
Here again we have the depressed immune system, which is caused by the electromagnetic blasting that we're getting from, the charged tail of Nibiru. Bees, the colony die-off, is another example of climate change and the effect, here again, the depressed immune system. This affects critters, it affects people. And the colony collapse has been, blamed on pesticides and infestations of mites and the like. But according to the Zetas, the bees are having a depressed immune system. And can man do anything about that? Yes, they can stop hauling around bee colonies for pollinization. They pack these hives on a truck, drive them across state lines, and put them in the cherry blossom orchard or wherever, and they move them around. It's a business. But when you do this, you're spreading the mites, which are part of the problem. So they said, stop doing that and to protect your bees, or at least some of them. What I do here at home is I just make sure I don't kill off all the pollinators, because you'd be surprised there's a lot of insects that pollinate other than just the honeybee. So colony collapse associated with climate change. The Pithovirus, something new that was discovered in Siberia, hit the news recently, and it was a huge virus that had a huge amount of DNA compared to regular virus, kind of a cross between a virus and a bacteria, and they were saying was dug out of the permafrost, and they figured it was frozen for 30,000 years. Well, now what the Zetas said is, wait a minute, considering that we have a crustal shift every 3,600 years, now this is in the opinion of the Zetas, who are describing the crustal shift that Nibiru causes when it passes by, the Jewish Exodus being the last, the time of the flood being another one, etc. Really, that was not frozen for 30,000 years, but it maybe was frozen for the last 3,600. However, the permafrost does not go more than a couple of feet down, and down below that, it's not frozen. You have methane pools being developed and occasionally now exploding and creating these strange, well-shaped, holes in Siberia that people are scratching their heads under. But this virus it's not that old, it's not that uncommon, and according to the Zetas, people in Siberia and critters in Siberia are very accustomed to dealing with it. So it's not like one of these horror shows where, the creature that they dug out of the frost up in Antarctica or down in Antarctica or up in the Arctic are going to somehow, infect the world or is some sort of a alien critter just waiting to emerge. It's not like that, but the fact that we're even hearing about that in the news, a new virus dug out of the permafrost, that's climate change again. Fish kills. The plate movements, as I mentioned, shifting rock layers around will release methane, and boy, fish and birds are very sensitive to this. And you have in the news, all around the world, massive amounts of fish, tons in this spot or that spot, and they say, we don't know what caused this, and the news will speculate, it was probably pollution, but mostly they say they just don't know. Well, it's methane, and they're very sensitive. Actually, what happens to the fish, the methane, because they can't help but breathe it, it's in the water, it creates an emboli, an air bubble in their circulatory system, and that's the killer. Now, the same thing happens to birds, which are also very sensitive to methane. What you've heard about the canary in the coal mine, this is the miners taking the canary down, and if the canary stops singing and dies, whoops, we've got a methane leak, and then you got to get out of the mine because, whatever you do, don't light a cigarette because, boom, we'll all blow up, right? So the birds would be falling out of the sky, and this was in the news for a while. I think some of these things, after a while, the editors of the newspapers or whatever are told, don't publish those reports. You can hear about it on the internet, but you don't hear it in the news anymore. And the birds are very sensitive to methane, and when it rises, because methane is lighter than air and will rise, it does them in, and they just boom, 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 boom. The ground is littered with dead birds. Okay, antelope. Does it just birds and fish? Nope. Over there, the Saiga antelope, over there in the Kazakhs, the area between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea, we're dying in great numbers. And this is a local antelope that's used, like we hunt for deer in the United States. The locals would hunt for antelope, and it was considered a food source in the high plains there. And what on earth, here they all are laying dead. They are very sensitive to methane, and it kills them. If you breathe, in fact, if people, breathe methane and can't get away from it, you wouldn't last that long. It makes you sick. And we've had, there was one day, I think it was back in 2007, I talked about it as the day the earth farted, from all the way from the UK across the United States, and down into Australia, in a big long line. Birds were dropping out of the sky, and people were saying, I smell gas. There's a gas leak. Well, there wasn't a gas leak, and they could never locate one. But people were being taken to the hospital when they were feeling nauseous and dizzy, etc., and that was methane. Although nobody ever said that's methane. They just said, must have been a gas leak.
I don't know. Was this at the same time, Nancy, of the Four Corners methane plume, the Four Corners of the United States, southwest Colorado, that area?
No, this was some years. Yeah, they admitted that it was methane.
Right. I thought they investigated that.
Yeah, I think that this was like 5 years earlier, and I don't have the date, but I think it was like around 2007. But it went all the way across. They had a mall in Australia that had to be vacated. I know it was like near New Jersey somewhere. I know it was in Austin, Texas, where they had a lot of the birds fall, and it was all the way over in the UK somewhere too. It's this long swath, and you could draw a line, between these areas, and it was all the same day. So there was some sort of a crustal shift, with rock layers moving and releasing methane on a diagonal, some sort of a plate movement, and it never came out that it was methane. And the Zetas were the ones that had to put a light on it and say this is the cause. So after that, we didn't hear a lot about dead birds. I mean, it was occasional, that type of thing. But I know fish kills are still getting in the news. Sleepy Hollow. It's not just the methane. It's also the fact that you can get like a magnetic sickness. When and this came out over the last 10 years also at one point, there was a forum that was discussing about feeling dizzy, feeling nauseous, going to the doctor, and the doctor can't find anything wrong. And it was described as kind of like the woozies, and people would say, well, I got, the woozies, and my mother did too, and neither one of us, and blah, 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 and they would go to the doctor. The women were having an odd result with their periods. Either their periods were late or they would bleed too much, and nothing could be found wrong. No fibroid tumors or anything. So this is caused by a magnetic swathing back and forth. The tail is charged, and when it enters our magnetosphere, it disrupts that. And it's humans and animals alike. Now, I actually, on occasion, get a wallop, and I know there's a woman in France we always share on the internet. It feels like someone comes up beside you and gives you a push, and makes you fall sideways. And you don't actually fall, but you feel like you're about to, and you catch yourself. And that's what a magnetic wallop, and the kind of dizziness or feeling nauseous. So is this documented? Well, yes, in Sleepy Hollow over there in Kazakhstan. And this hit the news. It was like a mystery. Why are people getting this? It seems to be like a swollen brain thing, but there's no cause for it. But they can't even determine that it's a swollen brain thing. But people will fall asleep and it's forever. They can't wake them up, and kids and it seems to be when the wind blows from the old uranium mines, which they have, but they have determined that there is no uranium in the air or the water, and they don't seem to be poisoned by uranium. And anyway, uranium poisoning doesn't cause this, so what the heck is it, right? Well, they were feeling dizzy, woozy, and nauseous, right? And it was just this area. It was kind of like a village there. So the Zeta said, had me go and look at uranium and how it interacts because it's not magnetic, but it's a paramagnetic product, a paramagnetic subatomic particle, which means if it's in the presence of a magnetic field, it will participate. So therefore, any uranium in the area combined with the magnetic walloping, from electromagnetic pulse from Nibiru's tail, becomes like a double whammy, and it's a boost. And that's what was going on, there in Sleepy Hollow, which is still struggling with that problem. And my recommendation, which I sent to the man who coordinates our Russian translations of the Zeta Talk site, was that they should move that village and get out of there because it was not going to change,
No.
and they were just getting a double whammy, right? So during all this discussion on climate change, which is very real, and it's really not going to go away. We're going to have, in the opinion of the Zetas, the prediction they've made is that we're going to have a passage of Nibiru, we're going to have a crustal shift, then everybody's going to have a somewhat different climate, which is something we've talked about on this hour on USA
Right.
EBM. And remember, it's not caused by man so much as it is caused by that interloper, Nibiru. Now that's the end of my lecture for tonight, and we can open up for questions from the chat room or discussions between Andre and I, whichever.
Okay. Well, I wanted to just kind of close the loop on that too with some of the changes that we have been talking about For those of you who don't listen to our program regularly or are new to USA Emergency Broadcasting Network, we do weekly radio programs here, but the monthly one that we've been doing with in partnership with Zeta Talk and Nancy has been going on for the past 8 months. And you want to check out the other episodes that we've done. Our most recent episode was the 7 steps to determining your safe location, which is kind of really dovetails into what we were talking about or what you were talking about, Nancy, with Sleepy Hollow. Is sometimes if you do see these effects in your area and you're experiencing them, maybe the best bet is to migrate somewhere else or migrate to a safer location. And if you'd like, as a listener, if you'd like out there to check out some of these other subjects, go to zetatalk.com and click on the link for Zeta Talk in the media, or on the Zeta Report on YouTube. Just go to the search line and Zeta Report, 2 words, right, Nancy? You've got them all cataloged there.
Yes, exactly.
Excellent.
Yeah.
One question that we did have from the chat room, I believe, is from Juan in Florida. Is he has 2 nieces and a daughter expecting at this point. His question is, what's the likelihood of children born now having the possibility of hybrid? I know it doesn't really refer to what we were talking about today, so if you'd like to address it, I'm not sure. That's it's about the he's just curious. And he likes the pole shift discussion. He's a fan of Zeta Talk, so it's not a trick question by any means.
No, it sure is not. And hybrids, there are people who have a little bit of Zeta DNA, but it's not evident. You can't see it. They don't look different, and even if you did a DNA test, it wouldn't show up. So percent or 2, difference in, but. The full hybrids, 50-50, which are being developed to be mankind's next leap forward, are actually, you might meet them in contact, like you might meet them on a spaceship if you are a contactee, and almost everybody has become. Half the populace of the world, as of like a year or more ago, according to the Zetas, were already having given the call, were having met aliens of various kinds, but it's all in your subconscious. You feel different. You sense that you got an answer to your question, that type of thing, and you may recall it. You may recall it during dreams. You may just lay down and meditate and have things pop into your head, and you wonder if it's real or not. So you can pull this in, and the reason it's so secretive is they don't want people attacked. Where someone in the establishment, organized religion, or some, really stiff ultra-righter type says, oh, they're speaking to demons, kill them, and this kind of thing can happen, so that you end up discussing it with other people who seem to have the same kind of feelings or recall or whatever, but it's more of a safe environment, but people are feeling comfortable with the idea of aliens are real, etc. So the hybrids exist. They're living with the Zetas. They're living with in the next dimension, or the next density, so that their vibrational frequency is faster than ours, and therefore we can't see them, and they come over, on spaceships or whatever to talk to people. So your kids, your babies, they may have a little Zeta DNA, but it is unlikely. It's only in special circumstances where they want somebody to be have a particular ability that a 100% human DNA would not provide. So the chances of those kids having any kind of Zeta DNA or being a hybrid in any sense of the word, pretty darn close to 0.
All right. I think that answers Juan's question. And thank you very much for fleshing out some of the background on that, too. One other thing that's been in the news lately that I've had a lot of questions on the Facebook portion of discussing Earth changes and pole shift is this recent rip out in Bighorn,
Montana. Yeah.
Which is close enough to the Yellowstone caldera to, cause everybody to start screaming that then we might have a super volcano eruption. And if anybody's been reading Madtown Prepper's page on Facebook or Earth Changes and the Pole Shift, poleshift.ning, knows that some of these volcanoes and the volcanic activity that we are seeing in regards to crustal pole shift is due to the influence of an interloper, as you said. But looking at my research on some of the earth changes that have been happening, this rip out in Montana, I don't think it is associated with Yellowstone particularly. I think it might have something to do with the Juan de Fuca and the Columbia. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, exactly. And the Zetas addressed that. I thought that was fascinating, that it just appeared a monstrous crevasse, and apparently it's still growing.
It's big.
There was, when you see a human standing on the edge, you get the feeling it's like a tiny ant, and this, it's miles long and wide and 100 feet deep, and the speculation by geologists was there was a spring on that side and a spring on this side, and it kind of made the middle juicy and slippery, and that's why. Mm-hmm. Well, wait a minute. This has never happened
miles?
Before. And where is this historically? How many centuries have people, been in, and they go hunting there? They run around in this area, the Bighorn Mountains. Now it's just to the east of the Continental Divide. So, the Zetas had me look all this up, what has been said about the Continental Divide and where it's located, and and the answer that they gave was, and it required repeating what the Zetas have said about the Continental Divide and all that. We have a Continental Divide that goes all the way from Alaska, all the way down through North America Plate, all the way down through South America, and the Andes, the Rockies, etc. And it's the high point of the continent, where after everything slopes to the west and drains to the Pacific, or slopes to the east and drains to the Atlantic, or wherever. And it's the high point. Well, what causes? Well, it's mountain building, right? Well, how come we don't have something 15,000 feet up, actually on the beaches of, let's say, San Diego, right? It's there inland, and it's because of the way, as you have periodic subduction, you have these pole shifts that happen every 3,600 years. In the opinion of the Zetas, it happens, and it shoves the Pacific is shortening and the Atlantic is widening, so all these plates of the Pacific are shoving under the South America and North America, and causing mountain building. Well, how does that happen? That the high points of the mountains are pushed up and the beach is not? And he said it's because as you shove under, little by little, these plates, which are many, many layers of rock, and slip and slide across each other, that the ones close to the beach have had this shoving done so many times that the rock layers are worn smooth and they slide across each other readily, right? So and the crust above has become thickened and hardened, so they don't rise. But where the mountain building happens is where the rock layer is first shoving inland and encounters obstructions, and then and so now we get pushing up and crumbling and that type of thing going on. So they said, watch the Continental Divide. It's the area to the east of the Continental Divide that people need to worry about. And they gave explicit safe location information about, for instance, Colorado, the mile-high city of Denver. It's not there where you're going to get rock and roll, because that's under solid layers of rock that are not going to rumple and shatter. Go to the eastern part of Colorado as it moves into the plains, and that's where things are going to be tossed around. Cars will be upside down and this and that. And then when it's all over, you look around and you find out that your elevation has been raised. Where you used to look up to see blah, 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 you're now going to be at a level. And now you can look down toward the plains. So they said that about Montana, about Colorado, about British Columbia, that it's east of the Continental Divide, that you will have this rock and roll going on, right? Well, in my mind, I always thought it was going to be the New Madrid rips, the San Andreas adjusts, we have big quakes on the West Coast, we have volcanoes go off on the West Coast. You know, I mean, I'm talking about even the hour of the pole shift, all this, and this very much shortening of the Pacific, and it's going to, and then sort of during the hour of the pole shift, yes, to the east of the Continental Divide, we're going to have rock and roll. But apparently, we're having a knock on the door in Montana, because the Bighorn Mountains are just to the east of the Continental Divide. There is a valley there, and then you have the Bighorn Mountains, you know, but essentially it's in that area that would be rumpled and affected. And Zeta's told me to go and look where the Juan de Fuca plate is. Well, directly to the west, on the same latitude as the Bighorns, is the Juan de Fuca plate. So what they're saying is that the deep rock layers on the Juan de Fuca are shoving up under Oregon and et cetera, and Washington and over, and affecting, you know, pushing the Continental Divide to the east in Montana. I mean, not completely, not to the extent it will be during the hour of the pole shift, but enough that it caused the Bighorn Mountains to go, and that's what caused the crevasse. You know that. So, I'm telling you what the Zetas have said, and it makes sense. You know, but the point is, they do not have an explanation for this crevasse in the Bighorn Mountains. They have no explanation. They're not having rains. They're not having earthquakes up there. And boom. No. And it has nothing to do with any kind of a volcano pushing up. It has, and as a matter of fact, the Zetas have said, and they are so invariably accurate, do not worry about Yellowstone. It is going to be like it's going to be like St. Helens or Popo down there in Mexico City. It's going to be a regular volcano. It is not going to be a super volcano.
Popo.
Yeah.
Right.
And the reason,
there's going to be volcanoes now. There's going to be eruptions. Yeah. It's just not the super eruption that we have seen in the past there.
That's right, and they have said about Yellowstone, and the reason is it's like a baffle. You know, like the muffler in your car. Mm-hmm. The reason it doesn't break your eardrum is it goes through the muffler is baffling. The air has to go to the right and the left and the right and the left, and by the time and so it breaks up the sound vibrations. Well, you have that baffling going on underneath Yellowstone, so that the lava coming up, it doesn't have a straight shot anymore because of all the pushing in from subduction from the Pacific plates. No supervolcanoes for Earth, and not to worry.
One other question. I know we've got about 6 minutes left in the show, Nancy. One more question from the chat room is in regard to contactees and the difference between, I guess, being aware of what's going on in the world as far as Earth changes and climate change, and the fact that some of the media that we watch and listen to is not telling us the full breadth of the truth of what's going on. The difference between what we're talking about here with the awakening and contact and awareness, because there's I'm a philosophy major when I went to college back eons ago. And words are important, so being aware of what's going on and being awake to why it's going on, is this part of the half of the people in the world that you said have, according to the Zetas, have been contacted? Are they the awake portion or the aware portion, I guess, is the question.
I would have to say aware, because being awake, and by that I think you might mean that they know that they're a contactee, and they've put it together. They've connected the dots, and they've had recall, and they even know what the critters that are coming to visit them look like, because I got to tell you, the vast majority are not hominoid. They come in all kinds of weird shapes and sizes, and so that's someone who's aware, but and you probably, because they did they meditated, and they did maybe self-hypnosis or had a lot of dreams and sorted it all out, and they're comfortable with it, but being aware would be, and that's probably the reason that they gave the call anyway, and the call, as it's called, is considered reaching out for counseling, I wish I knew, I'm puzzled by this, I'm disturbed by, I have the odd feeling that we're not being told the truth by the government, that the news is like giving us trivial stuff and not really telling us the meat and potatoes that's going on, and how come the weather's gotten so weird, and how come the sun and the moon are in the wrong place, and this kind of thing, and maybe they only subconsciously are aware of this, but they're uneasy, and so that's considered giving the call, because you're asking for a consultation, and then here are the little aliens, and they make you, at first you might be a little nervous, but they're giving off the right vibes, and they know what you're asking for, and they give you the information. Well, you're going to have more trouble. A lot of people would have very uneasy feelings about living too close to the coast. They would have flood dreams and things. They would be worried, and until they moved away from the coast and weren't going to be affected by sloshing oceans, they couldn't get rid of that. Well, and this is like your subconscious is telling you. So the aliens will warn you. They'll say you're not in a safe place, or maybe this horrible stuff is going to happen, and you're telling me that there's nothing you can do about it because you need special medication that's not going to be available, or you're so old you can hardly walk, and that kind of thing, and you think your time has come. You'll be okay with that. The death is not the end, and this kind of thing. And so the person is like putting their life in order, and they feel, and saying goodbye to people here and there, and that kind of thing can happen too. Or maybe if they have young children and they say, well, I was thinking that we ought to go someplace where we can have a garden and have chickens, and that type of thing, or go and live on Uncle Bob's farm and help him out on the farm, and so people are making decisions based on what they subconsciously have been told, what they've been told during visitation. So that's an awareness. So yes, because they notice that the weather is changing and these things are happening and they're feeling uneasy, and they consult with these benign aliens, and they get information, and they make life changes based on that without ever consciously being aware. If you said to that person, well, you had a meeting with, an intelligent monkey or something like that.
Oh, you're crazy.
Or a green, you're
talk.
crazy. No, I don't. I don't believe in that. And they'll say, and that's individual, based on a person's ability to have the conscious and subconscious be comfortable with each other. If you're married to somebody who would divorce you immediately if you ever said anything like that, you will deny it. And if you're, or if it might threaten your job, or if you go to church and they absolutely say reincarnation does not exist and aliens are demons or something like that, you'll nod your head but secretly, that's not the case. The truth, but you don't force your conscious to deal with that. But people who are comfortable with all these concepts and they don't have a conflict in their everyday life, they are more likely to become consciously aware of their contact status. Right. So it depends on the individual if they are going to be both aware and awake or just aware.
That's interesting that you said that about the fallen angels. I don't think you said fallen angels, but demons is one of the references that a lot of the mainstream church folk will say in regard to ET. They do recognize and are aware of their changes, because I was promoting this show today on social media, and one of the groups I posted in one of the woman administrators posted back, okay, well, we're going to let this go right now, but you have to realize the Zetas are fallen angels and are considered to, I'm aware of who they are. Thank you for your feedback, and I appreciate feedback from all kinds of different groups. And, she left my post up because in her heart of hearts, I think she knows that maybe the message is more important than all of the dogma around it. It's like,
yes.
If we can, I think the more and more people, I think social media really is going to be some of the key to that going forward.
Yes,
getting the word
very
out.
much
The
so.
pictures, I think, with the pictures coming through that have been increasing more and more, and with rips and meteor showers and I think going forward, more people are going to be asking questions, and that's generally a good thing. I hope.
And it's getting into the major media. And in the minute we have left, there was video taken by a woman in Florida. She was very credible. She had another woman with her that saw the same thing in the sky. It was a big, brilliant moon swirl at about the 11 o'clock position. She took the video and turned it so you could see the moon was behind her and not where she was looking at the setting sun. She gave her name. She's a very credible person. The Daily Mail and the Mirror in the UK, Huffington Post, and RT all had a featured article, about this, saying, what is that object? And really they didn't have the answer, and of course we did in Zeta Talk, but that was not the issue because, of course, it's showing up on SOHO images and stereo images that the NASA provides to the public, and it's in all kinds of video and still photos and blah, blah, blah. Over the last 10 years, I mean, the Internet's awash with that, and my website, too. And it's not like it's new. What was new was that the Mirror and the Daily Mail and RT and Huffington Post and I think other media, outlets, major media as we call them, were featuring this. This is right on the verge of breaking out to being admitted. Yeah.
That story through the Pulse Shift chat was featured on before it's news, and it's gaining traction. It really is.
Yes, it is. Right. Precisely. When you get it in the major media, and they talked about Nibiru, the Mirror did. It even used the term Nibiru cataclysm as one theory. Well, that's the Wikipedia name for Nibiru cataclysm. If you type Nibiru into a Google search engine, that's the top thing that comes back. And on that page, they discuss two individuals, Sitchin and Nancy Leader. Mm-hmm. And I thought, wait a minute, the Mirror says Nibiru cataclysm. It's like a two steps to the Zeta Talk website. Right. It's getting very close. Yes.
Great. Well, not great. I mean, it's a cataclysm.
About time.
Well, I mean,
about time.
The closer we get, Nancy, the closer we get to the announcement, that's where we were saying, great, we're getting closer to the announcement, not closer to the pole shift. We're not. What we're trying to do here at USA Emergency Broadcasting Network and Zeta Talk as well, Nancy, personally, I'm speaking for you a little bit here too. What we're trying to do is getting the word of preparedness out to people, not so much in the shock and awe of, OMG, here comes a planet. Okay, here comes a planet, here's what we can do. Get away from the coast. That's 7 steps that we talked about last week. I mean, there's things that you can do as an individual without the government, without millions of dollars, without, maybe a little nudge or some help from ET, but, you don't need that either if you use some common sense and just look around you and notice these things happening. Look what happened. Look at what's happening to Texas right now. It's underwater. I mean, and a year ago it was the 100-year drought. So these things are happening. Something we can deal with as individuals, and that's why we're here, kind of promoting not just the facts but also the preparedness too, and some of the backstory of how we have gotten there, and sharing that information with without any bias. Really, it's like people can make their own decisions.
Right. Well stated. Yes.
Thanks. We are out of time, Nancy. I want to thank you for your time and always great information. We'll be putting this up on the Facebook and the social media, but also Nancy will be uploading this to the Zeta Report on YouTube, and you can check out Zeta Talk in the media on zetatalk.com as well. Thank you very much, Nancy. Great job today.
Thank you for having me, Andre. Have a good night. Yeah.
Thank
Bye-bye
you.
now. Bye-bye, all.
Bye. This has been the Zeta Report on situational preparedness here on USA Emergency Broadcasting Network. This show will be available for podcast approximately 1 hour after completion of the episode. At that time, you can download it or share it to your feeds or, upload it to your pages as well. USAEBN.org, ZetaTalk.com, poleshift.ning.com for more information on the pending poleshift. USAEBN.org is our main page for the rest of our radio episodes, so check that out too. My name is Andre with Madtown Preppers of USAEBN. Stay safe out there. Share the knowledge. It's free.